Was a big cave. I think this is one of the biggest tactical defeats for the president that we've seen in his political life. He created this box canyon for himself. Nancy Pelosi let him walk right into it, and now he's trying desperately to see his way out of it after watching on television this morning the havoc that a government shutdown, a protracted government shutdown, can wreak on the nation's aviation system, with all of those flights being delayed and so forth in the Northeast Corridor. I think that was weighing very heavily on what was happening over here at the White House. But as you heard at the very end of the president's comments there, he said that he is fully capable and prepared to shut down this government again if by February 15th we don't see some sort of agreement to get that wall down on the border with Mexico. Now, Brooke, I will tell you, standing here in the Rose Garden, this was pretty remarkable to watch, because as the president was moving through those prepared remarks, there were moments in which, and I suppose we know this because we've been following this man for some time now, he can't help himself and was going off of those prepared remarks, going off of that teleprompter, and at times ad-libbing about what he sees as a crisis on the border, talking about women having their mouths duct taped, at one point suggesting that if a wall is built on the southern border with Mexico, that the amount of drugs coming in would be cut, as he said, by a number that people don't really have a firm understanding of. And so the president was making some of these claims that he often makes when he talks about immigration, when he talks about the border in unscripted settings, and he was injecting some of those remarks, ad-libbing those remarks as he was reading off of the teleprompter here. So I think that shows you where the president's head is right now. He just can't give up on this wall. He just can't quit this wall. And I think that is why you're going to see, very possibly in the next 3 weeks, this country right back where we have been for the last 35 days, which is perhaps in the middle of a government shutdown because the president can't seem to get his way on the wall. Now, the other thing that was interesting to watch, being here in the Rose Garden, is off on the sidelines underneath the colonnade, over here leading into the West Wing. You can see the vice president, you can see Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, cabinet officials, other top officials applauding as if this was some sort of victorious moment for the president. Yeah, celebration. That was just right out of Alice in Wonderland, Brooke. That I mean, to see the White House and people inside the White House applauding the president during one of the biggest tactical defeats, strategic defeats of his political career, to me just felt like the upside down out of Stranger Things. It is just bizarre to see something like that happen. and they were looking jubilant before he even began his remarks. They were smiling and clapping and laughing and that sort of thing. And it goes to the, and this is something that we see day in and day out over here at the White House. There are just people here who are not dealing with reality. The reality on the outside world is that during a 35-day shutdown, people are suffering, they're crying, they're on the news talking about how they can't pay their bills and buy their insulin. And over here at the White House, they're smiling and clapping and congratulating themselves for a shutdown that just caused a great deal of agony across the country. And it was striking near the beginning of the president's remarks when he said, and he made this claim that there are government employees who have been getting through this just fine. He suggested that government employees are getting through this just fine. That just suggests that he's not looking at the real, when he looks outside the window of the Oval Office, he's not looking at the real world. And so that is why, if folks are wondering at home, could we be here in the exact same place 3 weeks from now? I think that's probably not a bad bet to make at this point. This president is hell-bent on getting a wall. And my sense of it is he'll sign this CR to get the government open again, but we might be right back in the same place 3 weeks from now, Brooke.
He can't quit the wall, so says Jim Acosta. Jim in the Rose Garden. Jim, thank you. You know, it is this sort of upside down world, David Chalian. But how do all these federal workers and the rest of us get right side up? I mean, obviously, we've been pointing out this is a deal he could have had 35 days ago. Like, you could have cut and copied the speech that we just heard and posted it back to December 22nd. So what now?
Which is why, as Dana was saying earlier, right, this is everything the Democrats asked for, and as she said, some Republicans. But we also have to remember, this is actually everything that all the Republicans and Democrats and President Trump agreed to before Christmas, before he completely reversed course. That's what this is. Extending funding for a limited period of time so that the debate over border security in the long run could be dealt with. That's actually what Mike Pence went and agreed with Mitch McConnell was the deal. And so it begs the question, how is this not all for naught? The entire 35-day period was completely for naught. And so when the president says in his remarks in the Rose Garden today that this is going to provide an opportunity to have that debate, you just have to scratch your head and be like, that opportunity existed on December 22nd, and he was for it until he completely then rejected it. It just defies logic at all.
Totally.
Which is why I think Jim is right to note how devastating of a political defeat is. And one can only hope that some of those smiles and applause from the staff is because they understand how crushingly bad this government shutdown was, and they perhaps some of those smiles and applause are just because of the mere fact that the government will reopen and the pain will stop.
But for these federal workers, again, like that's what I always kind of come back to. And Carrie Cordero, I mean, of course, there are the ramifications of safety, and we've been talking to TSA folks and ATC folks. But you know, and I know that a lot of these people will get paid back. But are there long-term effects to this for these workers?
There absolutely are, Brooke. You know, I spent 13 years in government, and you can't just turn government on and off again, especially in the national security and homeland security space. There's investigations that are ongoing. There's work that's being done, intelligence being collected, sources that are being worked, all sorts of things that are taking place that you can't just turn it on and off. The other thing is there's a lot of mid-career folks in government who are going to think about leaving federal service. There's young people who are thinking about, well, maybe I won't go into federal service because it's just so, it used to be more stable, and now it's something that's unpredictable. So there's just so many aspects on the national security side, on the homeland security side, and as far as the long-term effects to the federal workforce that are going to outlive this shutdown, and then the uncertainty of there potentially being another one just a few weeks from now. There's going to be people who are going to turn in their retirement papers and who are going to leave government service in the middle of their career when they're just seasoned and expert in their field, because they're not going to be willing to put their family through this again.
Okay, so let's continue. I like the Stranger Things analogy from Jim Acosta. Like, let's say we're in this upside down world, Nia Malika Henderson, and you know, hopefully the government wants to write this. And so, all right, they reopen the government for 3 weeks. They try to get there together, and what if they don't? I'm pushing this forward. If this goes into national emergency territory, does that then, you know, who wins there, I guess? Is it the president because he then potentially would get the money for what he wants, this wall, and Democrats win because they get to say, see, we didn't cave?
You know, who knows in terms of that scenario, the national emergency, whether he's going to try to kind of move money around, as was something that was floated before. It looks like, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it looks like any sort of declaration of a national emergency would face some court challenges. It also would defy logic in many ways, right? If there's a national emergency, and this was something that was being floated a couple of weeks ago, and the president decided not to do that. If something is a national emergency, you imagine that it's something pressing and imminent, and the idea that you can wait not only the first 35 days of this shutdown, but now 3 weeks, that'd be 50 or 60 days or so. It doesn't make, you know, it sort of doesn't jibe with this idea that there's a national emergency and an imminent threat to safety, even though, as you saw in that speech, Donald Trump is still trying to paint this portrait of lawlessness and chaos at the southern border. Women with duct tape over their mouths and faces in vans, turning left and right. I mean, this is one of these images that he keeps repeating. He seems to be obsessed with that notion of women being in vans and with duct tape over their mouths. But what was so striking about this today for me was this really was a picture of the president in full failure, right? I mean, here he was trying to paint himself as sort of the victor here, someone who's swooping in and having this deal. He's going to make sure that the federal employees get paid. He's going to make sure that this is a bill that comes up on the Senate and is passed. But he has failed at every turn around this. I mean, 35 days, he ends up with nothing. Nancy Pelosi has won every match. This is the president is essentially playing tiddlywinks, while you have Nancy Pelosi really having a strategy here, basically saying this to the president, that no negotiations over this wall. And we'll see. I think there will be some sort of negotiations, but we also know that Democrats are not going to fund this wall. I don't know how many times the president needs to hear that before he actually understands that. But I think after these 35 days, it should be pretty clear to him. But again, there he was with all of the kind of rhetoric that he's had for years and years about the dangers at the border. And so far, it hasn't worked to sway public opinion. If anything, public opinion is at an all-time high against him and against the wall.
And Brooke, it bears repeating what we said as soon as the president was over and it was done speaking. And that is, there is nothing that has changed in the past 35 days except incredible, excruciating pain that has been, felt by 800,000 workers, and then the ripple effects thereout.
Do we know when they will?
Nothing.
Do we know? I mean, I didn't hear anything definitive from Trump. Are you hearing anything about when they'll be paid?
I don't think we know the answer to that yet. As Kerry said, it's not as easy as you would think to turn on and off the spigots of government. They're supposed to be paid today. Today is a payday, so it might take a little while to do the retroactive pay. We're not sure the answer to that yet.